I'm really trying to bring my thoughts together on this because, you know, I asked myself a question earlier in the day, and then I said, you know what? Instead of just asking the hypothetical, this is like the question I had. Instead of asking it, I was like, let me take a couple seconds and look it up. And so I'm just sitting here, just glancing at some information, and the information I'm looking at came out of a video that I was going to do because I got triggered. It's one of the problems with me taking the hiatus is I always get all these notifications and shit that comes up on my phone and YouTube algorithms. I see all this crime going on. Right, I see this shit in the Bronx, and people just running and hopping. 4 or 5, young men hopping out of a car, robbing people, shooting people, carjacking people. I mean, it's happening pretty much in every major metropolitan city. You get the conservatives; they jump up and down. Democratically controlled cities, and there's some merit to the argument, but a lot of their argument is just disingenuous in the first place, and I'm gonna get to that in a second. But that's where the population centers are. I mean, just plain and simple. That's where the populations are. Um, but it's also where there's the greatest wealth inequality in the cities. You're gonna find people who are poor living on top of people who are wealthy, and I started to speak on like the shit with the undercover cop getting attacked in the Bronx by, um, several young men. He was jogging. Then out there in California, in Little Saigon, I believe, it must be a small community. It's like Chinatown in Oakland, where a 60-year-old Asian dentist got caught. It was an attempted carjacking, and they ended up shooting her, and she died. And then that's gonna, people are running around as, oh, it's a hate crime and all this other bullshit. I don't even know, what group did that. Could have been black, could have been Hispanic, but be it the fact that, based on track record, the poverty, the area, if it is around Oakland or Chinatown, predominantly, black area, or there's more black people there, and black people are disproportionately poor because of all the historical shit that always gets ignored. Chances are they were black, even though in that video in LA when they were doing the street takeover and they went into that 7-Eleven, I saw a whole bunch of comments that were like, usual suspects and all this other shit, and like half the crowd was Hispanic, but that's a whole nother conversation. But like the arguments that I see online, these sort of, we've all seen the this typical bias confirmation, LeBron James, where's Black Lives Matter, we were Kangs, and all that shit. Every time this happens, I already said that black people are going to be the face of the crime wave because black people disproportionately poor, couldn't weather the storm of the pandemic. 2 years of everything that everybody went through. A lot of those jobs that people see as menial. You would have a number of black people who were working those jobs. Maybe they were the only one or the main one that were supporting their family, but there were no savings. That's the whole problem when you're in poverty and you're living paycheck to paycheck. There are no savings. There's no money to tap into. And we could talk about education and all that other shit, but the bottom line is it's not there. And survival does not wait for assimilation. But anyway, because all these crimes, the people on the far right, they jump up and down, they want to foam at the mouth, see, look who it is, da 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 da, completely ignore, it's black culture, it's the culture, yeah, culture of prolonged exposure to poverty based on, the marginalization of black people brought about by the system of white supremacy. Let's put it in its proper context. But they never do that. Oh, it has nothing to do with the redlining and the blockbusting and the urban renewal and the eminent domain and the convict leasing and the um, uh, debt peonage, and the denial of FHA loans, and the racial housing covenants, and the burning down of black communities like Elaine, Arkansas, Rosewood, Florida, Ocoee, Florida, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you're right, Wilmington, North Carolina, the burning down of any of these communities, oh, it has nothing to do with why black people are where they are today, right? Or the 1954 Highway Commission Act, running highways directly through the centers of black communities, like they did in Tampa with I-4, or like they did in cities like Philadelphia, or even I think it was I don't know if it was Boston, but they've done this all over. I mean, they did it all the way back in what, the 18 was it the 1800s with like Seneca Village. I think it was 1700s. The Seneca Village, which now is Central Park, right? They tell black people, oh, we don't want you to be around us. Go live over there, until they decide, oh, well, we need this land. We want this land. Get them out of here. Whatever you got to do, whatever policies you got to put in place, get them out of here. And make sure when we acquire that land, we acquire it on pennies on the dollar. And then we will claim that, this is prime real estate and that it's worth, millions. Just arbitrarily waving the hand and deciding it. And black people don't get any of that money. But again, it's not racism, it's not white supremacy, it's not systemic oppression. It's just the way that it is, right? Let them tell it. But I do feel some type of way like when I see this shit going on, because it's you're not gaining any allies when this stuff goes on. Like, black people are definitely not gaining any allies. They're gaining more enemies when shit like this goes on. But it's like, what can I say? All that stuff, all the, oh, it's about behavior, and it's about white Jesus. You gotta have the twinkle of white Jesus in your eye. They need religion. It's about behavior. We need more fathers in the home. You know what I love about the we need more fathers in the home argument? What I love about that argument is the fathers in the home argument doesn't mean anything if you have an ineffective manhood. And manhood, unfortunately, and I got people even in the black community that want to disagree and fight with it, but it's just the reality. If you do not have men who are gainfully employed, if you do not have men that have the resources to be the backbone of their family, the boys are not going to listen to them. If they have nothing to offer, if they have nothing to show, young men are not going to listen to them. So thinking that the men just need to show up and be fathers and all that other shit, when they have nothing to show for it, the young men are not going to listen to them. Plain and simple. Women are moved by what they hear, men are moved by what they see. What they can see, touch, taste, and feel. And if you don't have that, you got nothing. So, like, when I hear all this boo-hooing coming from outside the black community, I hate to say it, yeah, we could argue how embarrassing it is, but I'm like, without economic opportunities for young men, as Amos Wilson said, they will cannibalize the community, and they will spill out of the black community into other people's communities. There is no curbing their behavior, because there's no opportunities there. They're not going to listen. Plain and simple. And it's kind of funny watching some of these videos in these blue enclaves. And it's not that I'm advocating for other groups to, arm themselves against black people, right? Like, it's like, technically speaking, I don't want to see that. But at the same time, from a humanitarian standpoint, I believe that everybody has the right to self-defense and should be able to defend themselves. But it's funny as how, when I'm watching these clips, especially the one in Saigon and out there in California, Little Saigon, watching these clips of how they want to talk about everything except for being able to arm themselves, and I was it was so interesting about that. It's just like, just from a tactical standpoint, when I see these people, that lady was 60 years old, or even, I mean, let's compare it to the cop in the undercover cop in New York. He was jogging. This is a man who's physically fit, and I'm saying, to his credit, they snuck up, from behind. They hit him from behind. But I'm just saying, all these people who think that they're going to somehow kung fu their way through four, teenage males or young, adult males, You're not going to be able to do that. You know what I mean? Like even me entering middle age and shit like that. Like you're not going to be. I'm not going to be able to do that. And I'm saying, I love working out, I love exercising, but I'm saying your average person out here doesn't exercise. You know what I mean? So even younger than me, you know what I mean? They don't have the physical capability. You're not going to take on four males. I don't care whether they have guns or don't have guns. You're not going to take on four males. Four males hop out on the car on you and say, run your shit, and they start stomping on you and hitting on you from multiple angles. You ain't going to do shit. So I'm just saying, guns are the great equalizer, in that situation. That is your only the only tool that you're going to be able to do something in that situation. All these people that sit around and talk about Jesus and talk about, well, they shouldn't do. Well, they just did. You all sound like a bunch of women that talk about freaking restraining orders and shit. The restraining order does not stop anything. You guys live in some type of fantasy world when it comes to, shit actually, happening and shit going down. And what happens if he shows up? What is that piece of paper going to do? Not a goddamn thing. But yet you have these people that have, they have this law and order concept, in their minds, and it's like it just doesn't work like that. And I'm still, looking at the situation, saying to myself, it's like society thinks that, or not society, but people in American society think that you can have all this wealth inequality, and that you can have a segment of the population that is poor or disproportionately poor, and that the society isn't or shouldn't bear any consequences. I'm like, you're going to bear consequences. Again, that's not human nature. And this comes from like the white people that come up with all their like bullshit ass criticisms and everything. These are the same people that have written the books on human psychology. These are the same people that have written the books on, what happens to the human body when the human body is stressed, or the human body goes without food, or the human body, is in a hostile environment, and how it changes the hard wiring of the brain and all that other shit. They've written books on this shit. But yet, somehow, magically, when it comes to black people, doesn't apply. They're the ones that came up with phrases like 9 meals away from anarchy. But, somehow, when you have the way that black people have been marginalized in America disproportionately for, generations and shit, and they just liberals, let's call it what it is. Liberals let the fucking bottom fall out, and everybody, wants to act like they're surprised. Nobody's really surprised. These are bullshit arguments. Especially with all the guns that people went off and bought at the beginning of the pandemic, they knew it was going to get bad. Deep down inside, they knew it was going to get bad. Okay? That's why millions of guns flew off of the shelf. It wasn't just the George Floyd shit. No, they knew it was going to get bad. They're like, shit. You telling everybody to stay home, and then you don't want to cut the check, right? It's like, yeah, I'm an IT guy. I work from home. Yeah, I can do that. But what about these other people? These other people that got 3 or 4 kids and shit. What about them? You see, and it was just, everybody just kind of left that question up to the wind. You know what I mean? Or the government was like, here's a $1,200 check. I hope you're good now. Like, it just, the nonsense is just mind-boggling. But anyway, so I'm making my video, and I'm getting around to all these talking points I'm laying down, and it always reminds me of that movie Charlie Wilson's War, where Tom Hanks's character that was playing Charlie Wilson said, I need $2 million to build a school, and they wouldn't do it. They were like, nobody cares about Pakistan. He was like, Afghanistan. Nobody cares about Pakistan, Charlie, or Chuck, or whatever he called him. And it's like he tried to tell him, he's like, 50% of this country is under the age of 14. He's like, we need to build a school, because he knew what was going to happen. Plain and simple. It's like you got a bunch of kids growing up. You done went in there and the U.S. military showed up, and all they know is their parents are now dead. The U.S. was here, their parents died, and then they had to like struggle to grow up. And all it took was, somebody coming through and being like, you know why your parents are dead? America. You know why you suffered? America. You know why your family died? America. Right? And that's Osama bin Laden coming in there with that shit, right? And then next thing because somebody didn't want to spend a measly $2 million, here you got 19 guys with box cutters slamming planes into buildings, talking about Allahu Akbar. I'm like, how stupid can you be? Right? And so, I just thought, like, I hear all this shit that people are bitching about, like even the shit with fucking Joe Biden and this claim about, we're wiping $10,000 from your student debt. I don't know about y'all, but for people that got real debt, that ain't gonna put a dent in the shit. But whatever. I'm just saying, you got all these foaming at the mouth Republicans jumping up and down. Oh, inflation and oh, this money spending and da 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 da. And it's so funny. I'm like, how come I don't hear that same type of energy when it comes to the military industrial complex? When you got B-52 bombers and shit dropping all type of bombs that cost the price of Lexuses and Mercedes Benzes, on these foreign countries and shit. Just literally, like, just picture a B-52 bomber and just it's all you see is just bombs coming out. Each one of those bombs are like $40,000 a piece and shit. Just dropping them, just carpet bombing and shit like that. Even though I know they probably haven't done carpet bombing in a long time, but I'm saying, like, have you like followed up on like the F-52, a fighter jet, and like just like the freaking misappropriation of resources and just the waste of capital? Like, have you followed any of that shit? You know what I mean? So when it comes to spending money on other shit, none of these people are fucking bitching. But in any event, and I will say, some people, they don't like it's weird because it's like the military industrial complex are like, yeah, pay for that shit. But then when it comes to like humanitarian aid, they're like, why are we helping them? And I do like partially agree with them, because I think that the priority should be Americans and America and American infrastructure and all that shit. Right? But you get these goofy people that it's like, they're more focused on this idea, and this is how the country's been divided. This idea, and it goes back to, what's that guy's name? Something Lee Atwater, the guy that was underneath Lyndon B. Johnson and talked about all that, busing, and how you speak in code and use dog whistles so that white people think that whatever policies are being put in place hurts minorities more than it hurts white people. Like, hurts black people more than it hurts white people, and then they're good with it, right? This is like the sick ass pathology. But the question came up for me is, I asked the question. I said, well, how much is it? Like, okay, you hear all this shit, white people jumping up and down on the internet, foaming at the mouth, especially on YouTube, right? It's the DA's fault and the bail reform and they letting them out and all this other shit. Now, I for one believe that if you committed a violent crime, like, you shouldn't just be out, it by the afternoon. Like you shouldn't just be out the next day or the same day, right? But I understand why bail reform and all that's there, because you have people who get jammed up, that they have money and they can just pay for the shit, they get out. And because of the economic disparities between black and white, you end up with these huge disparities where black people got to sit in jail for some measly bullshit until trial, because they don't have the money to bail out, where other people, like white people, they have more resources to fucking bail out, right? But anyway, you hear all this crap, especially in Philadelphia. White guys love to get up on the news and talk this shit. It's bail reform, and the DA and the prosecutors, and they're not doing this. And I'm like, okay, so what do you want to do? We need to take them, we need to throw them in jail, throw them under the jail. I'm like, okay, throw them under the jail. Okay, so how long you want to be in jail? They shouldn't see the light of day. I'm like, and how much is that going to cost? How much is that going to cost? Right? You want to throw them in jail. How much does throwing them in jail actually cost? Because we're not talking executions here. You gotta feed them and you gotta clothe them and you gotta do all that shit, right? I mean, hell, even if they don't have attorneys, you gotta get a public defender. Somebody's gotta pay the public defender. All this shit, right? And so you get all this throw them in jail talk, right? I mean, what does that shit honestly cost? And I was tying this back to, like, when we talk about like what really needs to be done here. Like, in other words, the point that I was making was it's gonna cost you either way. I mean, either the attitude is just purge black people, you know what I mean? And I'm talking to you white people, either do it or shut the fuck up. Because it's gonna cost you either way. Whether we want to talk about reparations for slavery and all the shit that created all these fucking problems, that black people have had no recourse of action, for, or you want to argue, okay, lock them up. I'm like, and how much does that cost you? Right? Because, like, right, it's like, notice how, okay, you talk about Joe Biden paying for people's college. That's my tax dollars, right? That's white people, right? You talk about prison and, yeah, lock them up. Okay. How come I don't hear any white people jumping up going, well, that's my tax dollars? How come they don't talk? If I say reparations for slavery, white people are first, my tax dollars. It's all about their tax dollars. But nobody wants to detail how tax dollars are actually being spent. Right? And this is where the racism, the seething hatred, and anti-blackness, comes into the space. Because I'm like, no, again, reparations for slavery, all that shit, Jim Crow, all that crap, right? We could look at, contract with Black America, right? Like how they do the Seminoles down there in Florida, right? Free education, for Seminole Indians, right? Because the Floridians, the state of Florida, basically stole their land, right? Or we could look at how, I don't know if Native American reservations and the money they make off the casinos is tax exempt. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think other things that are like out here. Like uh, what Ice Cube talked about in Contract with Black America, like black business loans that, have no interest or something like that. These sorts of things that aren't necessarily, money in hand. Although I know people would, they argue for money in hand, and I'm not against for money in hand. But what I notice is people, white folks, they jump up, my tax dollars, they start freaking out. But then they don't look at how much it costs to put somebody in prison. So anyway, I asked myself the question, right? And I'm sitting here in front of the computer, and I'm like, well, how much does it cost to put people in prison? Well, I'll put it to you like this: the state of New York, where is it at? New York. Their overall budget is just over the prison expenditures over $3.5 million, just over. It's like 3.6 something. Excuse me, $billion, billion with a B, to house 53,181 inmates. And so they're spending $69,000, almost $70,000 per inmate each year to house these prisoners. That's how much they're spending each year. That was just 2015. And so the cost, especially with inflation and everything else, has already gone up. And don't get me started on senators and shit like that having stocks in these prisons, to make money off of black people getting locked up. And right, and see, and that's where the conversation is going to get real ugly in a second. But I wanted to walk through these numbers, right? Because people will sit there and they'll talk, right? They'll take, black people, what do they say? 1350, right? That's the number that white supremacists like to throw around, right? That black people are 13% of the population, and 50% do 50% of the crime or something like that, right? 13% of the population and do 50% of the crime. So again, they want to come with the arguments, oh, they're just like that, all that bullshit, completely ignoring the past and history. But if we can move past that and actually have an honest conversation about reparations for slavery or some other form of investing into the black community to correct the wrongs that were done to the black community, the transgressions done against the black community, especially the way that we're disproportionately warehoused in prisons. I'm like, if I threw these numbers out, right? So going to the top of this piece, this is on Vera.org, prison spending in 2015. So overall, in 2015, this country spent $43 billion on housing prisoners, majority of which disproportionately were black. $43 billion. I'm just saying, if I could come up with a plan or something, some program, whatever, job creation, job skills, putting vocational trades back into the schools. If I just took a portion of that $43 million, again, black people being the majority of the disproportionately majority of the ones in prison, I'm saying, what could I do with that money so that we would actually have jobs training and that none of these men would be committing crimes, they wouldn't be robbing and stealing and all this other shit, because they would actually have skills and be able to be gainfully employed, right? Now, see, the reality is that, white people and other groups don't want this. They don't want this. They say, oh, the crime is here. Oh, lock them up, da 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 da. But they don't want to actually fix the problem because, again, that would have more black men competing with them in the economic marketplaces, right? The whole prison industrial complex is basically a whole a system, that hires guards and then you got the lawyers that are getting paid, you got the judges that are getting paid. There's a whole thing of people getting paid, a whole bunch of non-black people, especially white people and Jewish people that got their hands out that are making money on locking black people up. I mean, plain and simple. And I know, Michelle Alexander has pretty much already covered this. I only read parts of her book. I didn't read it from cover to cover. But anyway, let me just read like the introduction so that you guys get a clear picture of what's going on here, right? And I didn't intend to cover this the way that I am, but this shit triggered me because I'm like I don't even think all the white people that are foaming at the mouth and they're like, my tax dollars. I'm like, well, this is where your tax dollars are going when it comes to warehousing people as opposed to rehabilitating them. You know what I mean? Or correcting the problem so that they don't even end up in the prison industrial complex in the first place. Because either way, whether you're paying for reparations or whether you're paying, well, you are paying for the prison industrial complex. That's my point. My point is your tax dollars are already being taken away from you. And I'm like, I'm sure that obviously the foaming at the mouth racist, they don't care. They're like, lock niggas up, right? But then you got other white people be like, wait a minute, hold on. You mean that we spending this much money when we could correct this and not have this to really stop and curb violence and crime? And yes, that's what I'm telling you. If the money was reallocated where it should be allocated, but every time we try to talk about reallocating these resources, y'all jump up and y'all start foaming at the mouth and reparations was slaves. I didn't own any slaves. Oh, this is what about my tax dollars? You guys start saying that shit every time you start talking about reallocating the money. So instead, you rather pay the prison industrial complex, have these black men just sitting there in jail, collecting dust, paying, fat, sloppy security guards and all this other shit. I know the corrections officers are going to be mad at me for making this shit. But you know what you're making money off of. Fuck out of here. Act like you don't know that you're making money off of warehousing black folks. And you know the system is fucked. Find another job. But anyway, let me read this shit. Prison spending 2015. Because prisons are institutions where all aspects of life are conducted and administrated, they must provide everything deemed necessary for those who are confined there. So for very long periods of time, some for very long periods of time. This, as Vera's survey results confirm, is an expensive endeavor. Prisons must at all times provide adequate levels of security, program and administrative staff to run facilities, and both supervise and provide services for incarcerated persons, food and programming for the people under their care, including sufficient recreational and educational opportunities, infrastructure, maintenance, and upkeep, including electricity and other operational costs, and increasingly higher levels of specialized health care for a growing population with significant levels of physical and mental health concerns. In 2015, among the 45 responding states, the total state expenditure of prisons was just under $43 billion. This is per year. Because the size of states and state prison systems vary widely, there is a likewise variation between each state's total prison cost, ranging from $65 million in North Dakota, so that's the cheapest, to more than $8 billion, a fifth of the total spending. A fifth of the total prison spending in the United States in California. So California has the biggest prison industrial complex. And this is a Democratic state. The largest state prison system in the country. A common measure used by states to understand this cost is the average cost per inmate, calculated by taking the total state spending on prisons and dividing it by the average daily prison population. This figure represents the amount the state spends annually on average to staff and maintain the prisons and provide all prison services. Among the 45 states that provided data representing 1.9 million of the 1.33 million total people incarcerated in all 50 states, state prison systems, the total cost per inmate averaged $33,000. Well, let me read it right. $33,274 and ranged from a low of $14,780 in Alabama to a high of $69,355 in New York. That's per inmate per year. Eight states, Alaska, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont had a cost per inmate above $50,000. 18 mostly southern states had costs less than $25,000, while 19 states had costs between $25,000 and $50,000. So I don't know what the quality of what the quality of the prison is, but basically southern states are spending way less on prisoners than northern states. So if let's say northern states or blue states are more, I guess, comfortable, then maybe that's the state that you would want to commit a crime and get locked up in. I know the conservatives are going to have a field day with that one. But anyway, so below that is just the list of the states in alphabetical order and their cost. And then actually there's a second section here, but I'll just put the link in the description box. I'll let you read the section that's below that, inmate per cost. But the bottom line is we're spending a whole fuck ton of money, keeping people in prison. So I mean, I could read through all this. Alabama has about 30,000 inmates. Alabama spends about 466 million, 14,000 per inmate. Alaska only has 6,000 inmates. They spend about 316 million, 52,000 per inmate. Then you got Arizona. They have about 42,000 inmates. They spend $1 billion, about $25,000 per inmate. Look, these numbers are just insane. Let me just run down it again. All the states in alphabetical order. I'll put the link in the description box. So we got 14. I'm just going straight down: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut. So we got 14,000, 52,000, 25,000, 20,000, 64,000, 39,000, 62,000, 39,000, 19,000, 19,000. thousand, 29,000, 22,000, 33,000, 18,000, 37,000, 24,000, 16,000, 16,000, 44,000, 65,000, 35,000, 40,000, 22,000, 33,000. I'm at Montana, Nevada, 17,000, New Mexico, 36,000, New York, 69,000, North Carolina, 30,000, Ohio, 26,000, blah, 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 blah. You all get the point. I go all the way down to the bottom. So on average, they're spending about $33,000 per inmate. Like, and think about it, like how much, like, if you really think about it, I know, like, I don't know what the percentage of people that actually go to college are, but this country spends more money on warehousing people in prison each year, some of them indefinitely, than the government spends on people going to college. You know what I mean? I mean, I think it's like only Ivy League schools are probably like $33,000 a year or $35,000 a year. I think like last time I checked, I think University of Pennsylvania was somewhere in like the 70s. It was like $70,000 a year. It's like something crazy. But I'm just saying, like, when you look at these numbers, I'm like, like, this is what people are paying, for, like their, like, whatever, their semester or whatever. Like, this is what people are paying. And it's going to people being just to warehouse these people in prison. That's why China's like, we just execute them. We don't deal with this bullshit. I mean, the cost, And then China's like, yes, we execute them. We don't deal with this bullshit. And then we harvest their organs and then sell it on the black market. But I mean, does this change anybody's perspective on reparations for slavery? I mean, be it the fact that, again, going with the white supremacist talking point, 1350. Okay, 1350. I'm like, in other words, either way, you're bleeding, you're hemorrhaging money. I mean, what would America look like if black people were significantly contributing to the GDP? If you had, wealth, basically black communities that looked on par with much of middle class America. What inventions could come out of that? Don't make me go and Google all the inventions invented by freaking black people, because I can go and do that even when black people were only, considered, less of a human being. I mean, damn, you use it every day when you go through a stoplight, you know? But I'm just saying, like, this is an insane amount of money. What was that number? $43 billion. This is from 2015. But $43 billion is what we're spending on the prison industrial complex each year. I'm like, you mean to tell me that if I said, hey, I could reduce the number of inmates by, I don't know, 20,000 or something like that, if I could reduce the number of freaking inmates, if we took, X amount of millions from that and then directed it into some other areas, that y'all wouldn't go for that? You would go, reparations, I didn't own any slaves. That's my tax dollars. Really? Really? Man, that's some strong white supremacy right there. I mean, that's some strong white supremacy right there. I'm like, again, you're getting taxed on the shit anyway. You're getting taxed on it anyway. Now, some people will argue, nah, this keeps our economy going. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, there's areas in the Panhandle, that like the whole town is of white people is, provided for by having, a prison there that imports other people. There's all type of shit. They got caught with this crap. Even with like shit like gerrymandering, where they take prisoners from one location, import them in another, and then actually count them to increase the overall population so that that white community gets greater representation. It's crazy as shit. But if racism is not a thing, right? The marginalization and this systemic bullshit is not a thing, even though I can cite shit like that. $43 billion, right? We just gave Ukraine $40 billion. $43 billion each year. That's like giving Ukraine $40 billion each year forever. Just keep giving them, because I'm saying we got prisons aren't going anywhere, and I'm not saying that nobody should be in prison at all, and that we don't have some people out here that are really just some savages or some shit like that. You know what I'm saying? Like who's a crazy fucking like serial killer or like mass shooter, or like Ted Bundy. I don't want Ted Bundy out on the street. Fuck that. You know what I mean? I don't want any of these damn serial killers out here on the street. No, lock them up and throw away the key. But like people like that, yeah, they should be in prison. True savages should be in prison. But not people that are in there for narcotics trading, right? Or narcotics selling, not narcotics trading, narcotics selling, right? Even though white people, they want to, blame black people. My son died of an overdose because those damn blacks sold my son some fentanyl. I'm like, your son was looking for some fentanyl. And what happened to personal responsibility? I thought it was about personal responsibility. Your son wanted to do drugs. If he didn't want to die, don't do drugs, right? But, again, what do white people do? Change the narrative. Now it's the drug dealer's fault, because again, when it was the crack era, it was lock niggas up. It's black people's fault. If you don't want to do drugs, don't do drugs, right? But now that it's white people that are being disproportionately affected with the opioid epidemic that black people didn't even start, because that was started by the Sackler family, right? And their wonderful drug Oxycontin, right? That shit had nothing to do with black people. But because now you have this fentanyl market and whatnot, because you have all these white Americans that are depressed and everything else because of all the economy, the economic and shit issues, now it's black people's fault. So we're charging you with the murder of so and so because you were their dealer. Like, wait, what? Huh? What? What? I mean, talk about some lack of white accountability. You know what I mean? And the crazy thing is, that the good shit that like has people like dropping dead, like fiends are looking for that shit. Because with the tolerance, it takes them more and more drugs in order to get closer and closer to ecstasy, to get closer and closer to the Nexus in Star Wars, not Star Wars, Star Trek, right? Like I mean that's what it is. But I mean, I just look at it. I'm just like, you're paying that money regardless. Money is being wasted and blown regardless. And like I said, I mean, even if you took some of this money and job training for men, you want to talk about fathers being in the home? Okay, take some of that 43 billion, redirect it to either skill training, job creation in urban centers, right? And see here again, here's the white people. Oh, well, what about white people? These jobs are just being created for blacks, right? Like completely missing the purpose of the goal of what I'm saying, right? They said I'm like, you said fathers in the home, right? Well, fathers in the home, they need to be gainfully employed. And when fathers are in the home and they're gainfully employed, then they can influence the behavior of their sons, so that their sons aren't out here carjacking and robbing and stealing and all this other bullshit. That's the goal that we're trying to get to. But the minute that you say, "Hey, we're reallocating resources in the direction of black males in the inner city," everybody blows a gasket, including black women. Surprisingly, they blow a gasket. What about the girls? I'm like, I feel you, but the girls ain't the ones out there waving pistols in people's faces. This the talking points of, well, people just shouldn't do that, and they should just, despite the fact that they can't make it out here, they should just fall. That's not going to happen. Stop saying it, because it's not going to happen. Like I said, you got one or two options. Continue with this bullshit, with the wasting money, right? Instead of having more black people be like, productive in the freaking economy, or you can purge, right? Which is like the freaking white nationalist wet dream, right? I mean, that's what you can do. Or you can, talk about the reallocation of resources so that we don't have as many people in prison coming out of the black community. And if you say, well, what about the white community and white people who are also in prison? I'm not opposed to resources being allocated, for their shit. Again, a lot of this prison shit, comes from other shit. It's not like people keep trying to paint this picture, especially you goddamn Christians, that everybody in prison are in prison because they're evil, as opposed to it being economic. Motherfuckers ain't out here selling drugs and fentanyl and crystal meth because they're evil. No, they're trying to get paid. They're trying to make money. Fuck out of here with this evil bullshit. It ain't got nothing to do with that. Again, not saying that you don't have some crazy, wild, evil motherfuckers that deserve to be in prison, but that's just not the majority of why people are in prison. But see, I know why people want to make it an evil thing and, they're just like that, because they don't want to have to pay for anything, and they don't want to have to correct it. They want to make it that, no, that person is a problem and they need to be locked up. And it's like they're like this, they're like a doctor like misdiagnosing, a problem. And I'm like, you're not going to resolve the issue. And I'm saying, hey, fuck it. You cannot resolve the issue, and the crime in the streets will continue. That'll be the same. What else will be the same? And the fact that you're hemorrhaging money all over the place, that'll be the same. So the crime, so you don't. What do you gain? You're still losing money because you got to pay for the prison industrial complex, and then on top of that, and you're still dealing with the crime, right? Because you're not dealing with the underlying economic issues. So the crime continues, the prison industrial complex continues, and you don't get anything out of it. Versus, my, a prison reform reparations model. You have more productive black men participating in the economy, increasing the U.S. freaking GDP, lowering inflation, all these sorts of residual things that happen, right? Safer neighborhoods, right? Better schools, all that shit. Right, you're so seething in white supremacy that you can't see what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. That's my video. SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, or subscribe. And let me just make one last point. It's like, I really do get tired of this notion, like that black people somehow got themselves here by themselves. Like I said before, unlike other immigrant groups that came here, we were brought here by force. And every aspect of our culture, our being, our language, our hierarchies, our the ways in which we interacted with each other, all that was just stripped. Our religious orientations, political all that was stripped from us. And then what do we get after that? 100 years of fucking Jim Crow, and then after that you still have, low key racial tensions and animosity. So people like they want to compare us to immigrant groups and shit. That's bullshit. It's just bullshit. Black people did not get here by themselves, and we did not get here overnight by ourselves, and we're most certainly not going to get out of this overnight, and we're most certainly not going to get out of this by ourselves. This whole, telling people to pull themselves up by the bootstraps with boots or straps that they don't even have. This shit doesn't make sense. People want to say, "Oh, it was a handout." Okay, well then deal with the guns in your face, deal with the carjacking, deal with the the crime areas you can't go into or you can't live in because they're shitty, or areas that you have to drive around and everything. Like, it's just like you just keep this cesspool going, and then you just sit around the internet with your bias conference. Oh, see those blacks, they're just like that, and blah 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 blah. And it's like you're not going to purge them, so they're just going to exist as this cesspool of a population. From the white supremacist standpoint. I'm like, it's like motherfuckers just, again, like, white supremacy must be just, I mean, it must be that good, yo. I mean, what does that shit taste like? Like, it should gotta be delicious, man. To sit there and say, yeah, we're gonna do all of this, as opposed to what I'm suggesting, which would make like America as a whole better. You really want to talk about make America great again? I just gave you the fucking formula. But no, y'all don't want to do that. We want to, crime is up and all this other shit is up, and people don't want to deal with the root problem. Okay, well then deal with the problem. You don't want to deal with the root cause of the shit, then accept, what comes along with that. It's like what I said when I was talking about, dudes want to play the bitch position. I'm like, okay, well, you want to play the bitch position. Well, that's what comes with the bitch position. If you want to be the boss bitch, okay, well, that's what comes with being a boss bitch. You know what I mean? Like don't sit there and cry about it. Like, this is what you wanted. I presented the alternative. You didn't want that. And again, what I presented has more pros than cons, but you don't want that because of all this long-standing racial white resentment of black people, and I'm like, for what? What the fuck did we ever do to you? You know what I mean? Like, this shit is just fucking nuts, man. But anyway, I guess America will just continue to unnecessarily hemorrhage money, and these problems will still continue until the next, race riot where some, white police officers do some egregious shit, and then black people blow a gasket, and then they're out there burning down and tearing up more shit, and then we just like have these 20-year cycles of this bullshit because nobody wants to fucking correct the shit. It's just, why? I didn't own any slaves. My family's never had a racist bone in their body. Like the Republicans that like to run around and try to act like they're, see, it was the Democrats. They're the ones that tried to keep slavery. What state are you from? Oh, me? I'm from South Carolina. Do you know what your great grandfather, like, do you know like what he used to vote as? No, I never did ask him. Like, you fucking dumbass. He was a Democrat. What do you think? What do you think a white man in freaking 1935 and freaking in South Carolina? What do you think he was gonna vote as? You know what I mean? Like, these motherfuckers, they don't even. We're dealing with stupid people. I don't know what to do with stupid people. But the world is full of fucking stupid, emotional people. And that's why this country is so fucking divided, because it's so easier to tap into people's raw emotions and shit than it is for people to fucking do any amount of critical thinking, because we don't like to teach critical thinking in schools. We don't like to teach that shit. We don't like to teach people to understand, shit. People just exist in the freaking 10-mile radius of where they were born, and that's all they fucking know. And then, they're presented with any new information and it like hurts their brain. This is fucked up, man. Anyway, that's all I got to say. That's my video. SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, or subscribe. That's the last time I'm going to say it. All right.